Hey, what up? It is me, it is the guy, and I am back with another tier list in the Flophouse. I put some thought into this one. We've done a lot of franchises like Mortal Kombat, Godzilla, lots of shit. And I was just thinking, Capcom, right? We're always begging Capcom, please bring this back. Why don't you bring this back? Bring this back now! I love that you release 3 Monster Hunter games a year. I love that you release 18 Resident Evil games a year. I love that Street Fighter is always a thing, but can we give someone else a little bit of time to shine? So I thought I would go through Capcom's history of franchises. Now, these are usable franchises that are 100% Capcom owned. So there are some caveats in what I can use here, because when I think of franchise, I think of multiple games. I think of a whole brand that has been successful that Capcom can go and use again. So one-off failures aren't really applicable. So your Zack and Wikis, your Shadow of Rome's, your Fox Hunts, you know, those one-off games that didn't go anywhere and obviously weren't successes that Capcom didn't continue, I don't consider those a franchise. Likewise, even though Capcom has a pretty great history of licensed games, especially in the 90s, I don't think we can count those either. Like, Disney's Aladdin on the Super Nintendo or Goof Troop is not a Capcom franchise. The JoJo 2D games are not a Capcom franchise, etc., etc. D&D, AVP, The Punisher, most Marvel games, those aren't Capcom franchises. So I just have to put this out there that this is what we're currently going for. We're going for games that have, you know, multiple sequels, spin-offs, remasters, things that Capcom kind of acknowledges every so often or are not that old, and things that they can re-release whenever they sort of want. So with that out of the way, I'm sure lots of people will still complain, why aren't you putting this game in there? We can do those at another time, do a complete separate tier list for all the one-off Capcom games that didn't become a thing. There's lots we can do in the future. So look forward to that if you guys want it. Just depends on how you feel about this, and hopefully no one will be coming for my blood in the comments here for this particular tier list. But we're starting off at the top with Cap God. For you youngins out there that don't remember, the early 7th gen, when Capcom was putting out things like Lost Planet, Dead Rising, and Street Fighter 4, that was considered the Cap God age. You know, you could also say that that was in the 90s as well, but the name, the moniker really spawned from there. Smoking Sexy Style is just, obviously, it's kind of like your A or like high B sort of thing. Things that obviously are quite hot, but maybe are not like the Cap God status. Big Zenny! So pretty much what it says, if you're familiar with Zenny, it is the made-up currency that some Capcom games have had in the past. I just think it's incredibly charming, and it's stuff that they absolutely could utilize and make profit of, and fans would like it, but it's kind of unlikely they'll ever do so. Stuff like that. Fine. You know, it's totally fine when your status is this in Resident Evils per se. Everything's not perfect. It is not perfect. You could be better, but you're fine. Danger! This is getting close to like, I don't even know if this is worth considering at this point, but it still has potential. You can still get out of the situation. You'll be okay. And then we have Crap God. So, you know, the 2012 is the Crap God age for Capcom, where it seemed the Inafune age, that basically, or the end of the Inafune age, I should say. So I hope that makes sense to y'all. And let's start things off with 1942. We have not seen this franchise return in a very, very long time. I kind of doubt it ever will, actually, in all honesty, aside from maybe some Capcom Stadium re-releases. But there's several of these, 1942, 1945, and there's a bunch of spin-offs and stuff. I'm thinking none of these games are bad at all. But I don't think it's something that would get Capcom a whole lot of fans all riled up and getting hyped for. Actually, I'm going to drop that down to danger, because I think people will be like, huh? Why? And sad to say, shmups, aside from very niche examples and very niche communities, it's like it doesn't have that franchisability, and especially for to get people excited for Capcom games. It's like Capcom going back and bringing back the Tiger Heli or Varth, or those weird early arcade games that they sometimes put out on like a collection. It just doesn't strike me as a franchise that has a whole lot more to give at this point, but it's not like irredeemable garbage. So that's our tone setter for now. And I think this is a good, jump up. This is Armored Warriors. So this contains both Armored Warriors, the beat 'em up, and Cyberbots, the fighting game. So yeah, this has our main guy Jin, who is also in the Capcom Versus games. So I think this is something that is definitely above 1942. This recently got rediscovered Cyberbots and Armored Warriors in recent Capcom collections, the Fighting Collection and the Beat 'em Up Collection. And I think some of these characters, mechs in general, have a little bit more, I don't know, like groundswell with people. There's so lots of people that love mech stuff, certainly more than 1940s era airplanes zipping about. So I think this is fine. I don't think it's a big Zenny franchise. I don't think I can honestly put it there, but this definitely has potential to be a bigger thing in the future. And even just now, I think it is a good run-of-the-mill franchise that Capcom can certainly do more with in the future. Bionic Commando. This is a tough one, because I honestly don't think it's big Zenny. I'm feeling that Bionic Commando is fine. And the reason why I say this is because Bionic Commando has had so many chances over the years, and it doesn't ever quite hit that upper echelon of Capcom IPs. Obviously, lots of different developers have tried with the big 360 and PS3 game made in Europe. There were also the 2D games that, still very good, didn't really quite hit in the same way as when Mega Man would come back, or digital versions of Street Fighter would come back. Obviously, lots of people remember the NES game, and there's been Game Boy Color re-releases, and I think Rad Spencer is better off as one of those characters that comes back in cameos or things like that, shows up in other Capcom games, or there's costumes. I'm not 100% convinced you can really make another compelling Bionic Commando game to the level of, say, your Resident Evils or your Monster Hunters. I don't think that's going to be a worldwide slam hit. And remember, I'm trying to balance here between what I personally like about the franchise and where how valuable I think that franchise is, and how legendary it is, and how many people enjoy it. So I'm trying to balance all those things together. I think Bionic Commando is about on the same level. I want to say a bit more than Armored Warriors, but I don't think it's at Big Zenny. I unfortunately I don't. I'd like to put it higher. Breath of Fire is Big Zenny for me, and I'm just going to say it's because there is such a overwhelming passion of Breath of Fire fans to finally get a Breath of Fire game after 5-6 games. There's weird mobile spin-offs I don't play. I don't think anybody plays, but this was once a legendary RPG series, and I think it very well could be again. I don't know why Capcom is never. It's not like JRPGs are out of fashion. They're just as popular. They can be just as popular. You could even make more of a charming retro version of this. It doesn't have to be a big Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth thing. You can try to make it a bit more of a 16-bit retro style or something along those lines. It's just crazy to me that Capcom had a series that went on to 4 or 5 sequels and then just stopped. like, I guess they just stopped selling, but at the same time, it's just the type of thing that's brimming with potential. Like, I played Breath of Fire 2 specifically a bunch on the Super Nintendo back in the day, but I barely remember anything of it other than me really liking the character design and everything. It's shocking me that Capcom has not brought this back, at least in a Breath of Fire collection. Isn't that crazy? If they at least made a collection with the 90s ones, not the 3D ones maybe, but at least most of them, I think, you could get some people playing that. You can get some people talking about Breath of Fire in the mainstream. So, yeah, there's even more franchises that are shocking that Capcom has not brought back. I'll never understand some of the reasoning for them, but yeah, I think Breath of Fire is absolutely big Zenny. And it could go up even higher. Like, if they somehow do a reboot, remake, or a brand new sequel, and get that franchise up even further in the public consciousness, there's no telling how far it could really get. Dead Rising, Dead Rising certainly had its time, and I certainly think it could come back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
With how badly Capcom bungled the last couple of releases, I don't think it's smoking sexy. I think maybe at a point, if you had asked me around 2010 when Dead Rising 2 had come out, I'd be smoking sexy for sure. Everyone would be, but I think it's dropped off so considerably. I think you just need to reboot it at that point, or do like a full-on remake or something. Do something completely different with it, because I don't think you could just offer the exact same thing that Dead Rising 1 or 2 did and just be like, yeah, because that's what 4 kind of was, and that didn't go down well. I'm not even sure what they're supposed to do with this at this point. Like, and they've re-released HD versions of it. They've done spin-offs. Like, they milked this. They milked Frank's teeth for all he could give, and Chuck's too. And yeah, like there was Dead Rising 3, there was the HD Turbo HD Mega Remix plus Alpha that I really wish would come back. I think this can come back though, but I don't think it's an uphill battle to make me put this in smoking sexy or higher than that. I think it just left too sour of a taste in most gamers and the fans' mouths. Dead Rising off the record, like, I think Capcom really Street Fighter 2'd it, where they just made people get really sick of Dead Rising for a while. And I think if Capcom were to announce, like, at, like, this year, next year, hey, we're making a new Dead Rising, it's this and this and this, and, like, it's technically incredible, and it's got, like, a really good developer behind it, or Capcom themselves, I think people would be excited by now, but it's still iffy. So, yeah, big Zenny for Frank and Chuck and, the rest of the characters from that franchise.
Oh, wow. Look at that, boss. That's pretty fucking funny. Wow. Wow.
Did Dave Lang make this?
Dragon's Dogma, I would put this in fine, obviously, if it wasn't for Dragon's Dogma 2. So yeah, a couple of years ago, I would be like, Dragon's Dogma, no, that's a one-off kind of failure. But thankfully it wasn't. I think Capcom did strike while the iron is still relatively hot for getting that sort of FromSoft crowd in there. Obviously, lots of other RPGs. There's still obviously a market for that. People still really want it. And while I am not really aware of how Dragon's Dogma 2 has sold, I know lots of people like it. I've not played it myself, but I did play Dragon's Dogma and Dark Arisen a fair chunk back in the day. I think that's smoking sexy. I think that's smoking sexy now, for sure. And it depends on how they handle. I don't think this has got Dragon's Dogma 2 has gotten any significant patches that really improve the game or been giving players what people want. Depending on how that goes, how DLC is handled, and if they decide to do more with it, like that could go higher and higher for Capcom. That could be a really, really valuable brand. Because it's not quite there yet to be in CapGod. I think we need to see how Capcom handles in the future. But considering the little I know of how successful Dragon's Dogma 2 has been, with fans specifically, I think Smokin' Sexy makes sense. Dark Void. Dark Void actually kind of topical for the first time ever. Because Capcom announced, yeah, we're taking Dark Void games off because nobody cares. I know the original Dark Void, and certainly Dark Void Zero, have their fans. This is why I'm even including this, because technically it does have 2 games. Capcom very much tried to make this a franchise, like this is part of the big Inafune sort of thing. No, it is not on the same level as Bionic Commando, as Rad Spencer, who even is Captain Dark Void. And I if you give me a name in the comments like, oh, the main character is this, no, absolutely not. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. You don't know what his name is. You looked it up. All I remember is that he was voiced by Nolan North, and he looked like every single fucking protagonist circa 2011, whenever this fucking game was released. Dark Void Zero, though, that should have been a more widespread thing. That should have been available on like every system at the time. I think it was only available on a few. Don't really remember. But yeah, that's absolute danger status. I don't think it's crap, though. The last time I played it, I was like, it's fine, it's serviceable, and that's kind of it. The last time I played it, I don't have much to say about it, so I can't obviously say it's crap god, but it's getting there. Gonna be a trouble man. Darkstalkers is not Cap God.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would love Darkstalkers to be Cap God. It just isn't. I still think Darkstalkers is a bit too niche to really be a valuable IP where Capcom can just put it out, because they tried. They bungled it. Don't get me wrong. They tried to get the fan base energized, and it just wasn't enough for Capcom to be impressed. As you all know, Darkstalkers Resurrection, despite being a fantastic re-release of the game, is apparently sold not enough. So Capcom were like, well, people then aren't that's not enough to support like a big new Darkstalkers, but there absolutely should be. I still think the characters themselves, obviously Morgan, but pretty much all of them, has some definite appeal. In this day and age where everyone's, making a cryptid dating simulator, fucking simulator. I mean, the shit is still hot. And most of the characters, if not all of them, are some measure of hot. And I think that's valuable. Like, that's more valuable than Johnny Dark Void or 1942. So that's definitely smoking sexy to me, but it still doesn't have the universal appeal that, say, Street Fighter does or other Capcom IPs have. It's still a little too weird for some people. So I do think if Capcom were to bring back Darkstalkers with a big, 2.5D game like Street Fighter's become, I think it would be a success. I just maybe don't spend the same amount of money on it as you did Street Fighter, just to keep expectations to a certain level, because you want the game to continue and be profitable, to be a valuable franchise. So, speaking of valuable franchises, I think Devil May Cry is Cap God, and not so much because of its brand value and how successful all the games are. Some of them are very middling in terms of commercial success, but the fact that it basically spawned a whole genre, I think that's worth so much. That's worth it's the history of that franchise. This established, a lot of the tenets that we now call character action. A whole bunch of franchises probably wouldn't be created without Devil May Cry. And the fact that it's like an offshoot of another game, another franchise we'll obviously talk about. It's extremely impressive. And I think all of the characters, every main character in a Devil May Cry game, people are fans of. People love every single one. Every single hero, every single main villain. There's so much value there, again, as a brand, as a franchise. And Devil May Cry 5 was so well received that they can release a new Devil May Cry at any time. And people will be like, hell yeah. And it was a success. So they're handling everything with it really well. And I would probably put it down as Smoking Sexy style, perhaps. But the fact that, like Capcom has this in their pocket as well. This established this. It's considered the king of the genre still, kind of. Maybe. I think so. So that is absolutely a Capcom creation. I never know what Hideki Kamiya is going to do in the future, if he would ever rejoin Capcom again. I doubt it. But, while Dragon's Dogma is being made, the Devil May Cry team is making, some of them at least, are making Dragon's Dogma 2. You can have Kamiya step in and lead another team and make a new DMC. Like, I just remake DMC 3, do a full reboot again. Just maybe not have Dante. I don't think we need Dante. Dino Crisis. Dino Crisis is Big Zenny.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And Dino Crisis is Big Zenny just because, unlike Darkstalkers, which has a whole host of characters and several games, and Dragon's Dogma is like currently hot now and can be even hotter still, Dino Crisis has only had 3 games, right? And one game changes the protagonist completely, changes the setting, and bungled the franchise super, super hard. They fucked it up. Like, probably fucked it up harder than any Capcom IP, or we'll see as we go through. But 1 and 2, like, yeah, great, cool, and then it's just like, that's it. Then one mistake, and you're just done. You're just done, and it's our fault. It's Capcom's fault, not our fault, the fans. We actually showed up with no money to buy Dino Crisis 3. But yeah, I think because it only has the 3 titles and Regina, Red Hair Lady, some people know, and Capcom diehards certainly know about Dino Crisis and want Dino Crisis to return. Lots of people want Dino Crisis to return, but it's like, it's not at the level of, like, the other franchises we're going to be talking about. If it had a couple more games, like if it got to like 5 games, I'd be like, oh yeah, no, remember what happened in Dino Crisis 3, the good version, and then 4, and then it like transitioned on to like the Xbox 360, and there was one, like there'd be more to talk about. But because Dino Crisis, like, unfortunately went extinct way too soon, I think it's more of the Big Zenny zone. I hope that makes sense. Listen, I want Dino Crisis to return, but I just don't think it has as much mainstream appeal as a lot of other franchises do that we're going to be talking about. So I think I'm comfortable with Big Zenny. Please don't come for me, Dino Crisis fans. Final Fight, obviously Capcom. No, even though personally, Final Fight may be my favorite Capcom franchise, it's not even Smoking Sexy style. It's Big Zenny for sure.
That makes sense.
Even though many of its characters had that same appeal as Street Fighters and Darkstalkers, I think just because of the genre, and I think just because I don't even think Capcom knows what to do with Final Fight, they're just content with keeping it as a Street Fighter thing. I don't think they're gonna bring it back in any sort of big sequel way. They're just gonna continue. They're just like, yeah, we just keep these characters in the public's consciousness through Street Fighter, and that's kind of it. Aside from re-releases, I just don't see Capcom teaming up with anybody to make that happen. It'd be cool if it did. It'd be cool if they teamed up with, like, fucking, I don't know, the team that made Streets of Rage 4, because they're not making a Streets of Rage 5. They've already kind of confirmed that, I think. So yeah, I again, it's not so much the genre or, any lasting memories of that. It's just getting excited for a revival and seeing what that might be like. But it's more like the appeal of the characters. Like, it's so there. Like, all of the protagonists, again, much like Devil May Cry, it's just like, Poison, Hagar, Cody, Guy, Maki, Lucia, Dean, well, maybe not Dean, but Carlos came back in Street Fighter 6. I still can't believe it. Yeah, alongside Breath of Fire and Dino Crisis, I think that's fair. I think I'm being fair, because yeah, this is about my personal attachment to these franchises, and that I think they're good, but also where I think they kind of go in the hierarchy of Capcom, legend status. Like, it sold, like, the original Final Fight sold, like, over 1 million copies on the Super Nintendo, which was, like, a big, big fucking deal in the 16-bit age. But aside from that, like, I think the returns on Final Fight 2 and 3 were significantly lower, and then the less said about Streetwise, the better. So I think all that evens out into Big Zenny.
Ready, set, go!
So we have here Everblue. This is a weird one. These were made by Eureka, but both Everblue 1 and 2 were PS2 Capcom published games. And then Nintendo teamed up with Eureka and they made the Endless Ocean series, and then they're making a new one. But Everblue is Capcom's name on it. I believe they own this name. So technically this counts. This is a crap god. You can't really do anything with this anymore because of the Endless Ocean series. Like, there's not much, like, what? And unless you're going to be as good as Abzu or something like that, I think this is essentially worthless. Like, Dark Void at least has fucking Dark Void 0. So sorry Everblue fans, if you exist. I don't think you do. But yeah, I think this is, Capcom should sell this. I don't know what they should do with it, but if this never comes back, I'm not going to be too fussed because we have really good replacements being made by other people, the original developers, in fact. So I'm pretty confident that Everblue is crap god. Ghosts and Goblins. Forgive me if some of these images are not as specific, but I just picked the ones that like look the best. This is Ultimate Ghosts and Goblins, as you can see, but I'm just using this to represent all of the Ghosts and Goblins, Ghouls and Ghosts. I'm also throwing Red Armorer, just Gargoyle's Quest, Demon's Crest, all those games. All that's the same universe to me. I think this is not Danger. I think it's fine. I think it's on fine. We had that recent game from back in 2020, 2019, Resurrection, which I thought was quite good. I was really sad that Capcom has not made more remakes in that style of other franchises that we have and will be talking about. So that kind of sucks. I don't think this has the appeal of any of these above. I mean, they're simple platformers. They're hard. And they're certainly good, but it's like does Arthur have the same, a legion of fans drawing him as like Final Fight characters or Breath of Fire or Dino Crisis even? I don't know about that. I still love Ghosts and Goblins. I'm not very good at them, but I still love it. I think it is absolutely something that Capcom can bring back every so often. People be like, yeah, that's cool, but like, compare it to, I don't know, say Mega Man, I think it definitely belongs in the mid ranks here. Lost Planet, it's been a while. It's been a while since I could hold my head up high. I think Lost Planet is Big Zenny. 3 games, all of them interesting, I would say. It has a very interesting history, Lost Planet. Also, you have to put in that weird 3DS game that I forget the name of, that Capcom made sure to hard code in Japanese text so it could never be translated. What was the name of that fucking game? Anyway, it was a Lost Planet spinoff. So, I think you could bring Lost Planet back, do a remake, reboot, whatever. And I think that name still would make it a success. I still think that has brand recognition. It was one of those early 360 games, the original Lost Planet, that people were just kind of like, whoa, Jesus Christ, the new generation is here. I think there's value there. I think the second one being so much weirder was like crazy bold, and you could do that now. You kind of freed yourself up almost to do that. You just have to place it on a crazy alien planet, have some type of gimmick, some type of mechanics in there, and just let that play out. I still think that's a very evergreen concept to come to. Would Capcom actually do it? Would actually bring back Lost Planet? I don't know. I want to say yes eventually, but probably not anytime soon. Unless Pragmata turns into a Lost Planet game, which it very well could at this point. I don't know. Speaking of Mega Man, Mega Man! So Mega Man is obviously Crap God. No. Mega Man is a Cap God. Mega Man is so a Cap God. Mega Man can also come back at any time in almost any form, be it Mega Man X form. He can, I'd rather him not come back as a traditional blue bomber because we've had more than a fair share of those. You can bring back the Star Force series, the Net Navi series. There's so many guises Mega Man could come back into, and then there'll be a subset of fans that will be into it. And that's almost fucking priceless. And the fact that Capcom still has not made any movements on Mega Man is still criminal. Like, I know in the grand scheme of things, Mega Man 11 wasn't even that long ago, but it was also that long ago. But given his history and how successful of a character he really is, how versatile he is, and how well loved he is by fans, like, yeah, it is a Cap God. 100%, 1000%. Again, if I was running this show, if I was running Capcom, there'd be a new Mega Man game every couple of years. Like every 3 or 4 years, some new variant or something. You know, bring back the X series. Aside from mobile, what do we get? And there's that weird Steam version. I'm not playing. I ain't playing that. I'm not playing. Bring back Mega Man. Bring back Mega Man X, for fuck's sake. Something. Give it to Nintendo. Give it to somebody else if you don't want to do it. You know what? Doing anything with it, then do something with it. I don't. This is going to be a running theme for the rest, some of the rest of these franchises. I can tell you that for free. But like, if you ever doubted Mega Man as a Cap God, then you're on the wrong fucking channel. Monster Hunter. I would certainly think there was a time where I'd say Monster Hunter was fine. Maybe even Danger before it, you know, they started getting localized and stuff. But what was once a thing where it's like this will only ever be successful in Japan and it's just an afterthought in North America. Obviously, Capcom turned that around. It almost seemed like they asked like a shaman or had some sort of ancient ritual to suddenly make Monster Hunter super popular in the West. Just everything seemed to work out that Monster Hunter World became one of, if not Capcom's biggest success in the last 10 years. So obviously, that's going to be high up. I'm not sure if it's Cap God. I'm going to leave in Smoking Sex. No, it's sold more than like Darkstalkers combined. Like every Darkstalkers game combined, it's sold more. So yeah, it's such a cash cow that I don't think Capcom will ever stop making them. You know, and like it really led the way for Capcom to have a new wave of big AAA development that they can just afford now because the company's so flush with cash, like that, and obviously Resident Evil. But it just, you know, trickled down economics don't really work, but they certainly worked here. Really spread the riches throughout the entire company. Like it was such a out of nowhere success all of a sudden, so fucking hard. And then just kind of paved the way for the new Cap God era. Obviously, this era is not without flaws. Obviously, there's lots of franchises that Capcom could definitely afford to bring back, but, you know, haven't. But yeah, I think right now it's hard to argue Monster Hunter is not Cap God.
Gotcha, bitch!
Okami. Okami's a weird one. Obviously, there's 2 official games in the series, Okami and Okami Den. But there's been so many re-releases. Capcom knows fans love Okami. But still, no Okami. Remember the time when when Kamiya and Nakamura announced that there's going to be a new Okami? They weren't working for Capcom. It was such an odd thing. I know that they didn't actually announce that it was, but they just said, we are ready to work on a new one if we are allowed. And that was it. And it didn't go fucking nowhere. It was so bizarre. I don't even understand the point of that. Like, they just wanted to get groundswell. They just wanted fans to start screaming to Capcom, Okami, please Okami 2, and it just fell on deaf ears. No, sorry. We have 3 Resident Evil games coming out this year. There's no room for Okami. Anyway, I don't think Okami is Smoking Sexy style. I wish it was. But at the end of the day, the reason why is because it's like, remember, Okami 1 never sold well on the PS2. On the PS2, the biggest console available at the time. Yeah, I don't even think it sold 1 million copies. I think all the ports since then it sold over 1 million copies. But I'm trying to balance what I think about the game and how much value as a franchise and how much that brings to Capcom and how much prestige that brings to them. And it's certainly high up there. I think that's pretty fair considering. I would certainly revisit this, and like if Okami would ever get a new game, or something, I could certainly see how Capcom handles that, how people respond to it, and put that up higher. But yeah, it's not smoking sexy. I think there certainly could have been another timeline where it would have been. And we'd be getting Okami games every so often. Maybe new types of gods that you can control. Not just Amaterasu. Maybe there's a different type of animal you control in the next game. Blah, blah, blah. In different eras of Japan. Like, there's so much fucking potential. But of course, Capcom squandered it. And we're like, no, this has to sell 1 billion copies. That's the only way. But it is what it is. Yeah, I think that's fair. Because I'm looking at Darkstalkers here and I'm like, does that really make sense? I think it does, just because I think Capcom are aware and know that people want Darkstalkers and love these characters, versus they're like, oh, Kami, I'm trying to think from their perspective slightly about where it goes in like their prioritization, sort of like how they organize all these franchises, see which one has worth, which one has value, which one can we bring back, which one should we not. So yeah, much like Okami though, our next one, Onimusha, I think Onimusha has more general appeal, but why is that? Because of Souls games, because of From Software games. The fact that there has not been a new Onimusha when there's been so many other like Japanese gory action games that have come out, like obviously Sekiro, Ghost of Tsushima, Nioh, Rise of the Ronin, like these are hot now and they're successful. Nioh got a fucking sequel. Obviously Sekiro could get a sequel in the future. Like the fact that Capcom has not capitalized this is like a huge fucking mistake. Like the fact that Capcom put out one pretty dang good port of Onimusha 1 and then just after that, no, we're not even going to bother with the second or the third or the fourth one. That all of the games should have been remastered by now. All of them. And the fact that they haven't, like, it still boggles my mind. You're telling me there's not enough people in Capcom or enough other studios that can help Capcom make a new Onimusha is like crazy to me. You don't think this? I think this has such value. There's 4 mainline games, like 2 spin-off games. Like there's some mobile shit in there. I think not capitalizing on Onimusha is like a way bigger mistake than like not capitalizing on, say, Dino Crisis or Okami. I just think it's because there's so much more of it. Like it dominated the PS2, GameCube, Xbox era. Well, not the GameCube, because there's no Onimusha games in the GameCube. But you know what I'm saying? Like it dominated that era. There's so many of them. And it was hot. It was hot ass shit. And just now, just nothing. Like all the time that Dead Rising was getting all these sequels, I was like, you can't do Onimusha? Really? Really? So yeah, it's one of the most baffling things. Maybe it's not the most baffling thing in this list, but it's certainly up there. The fact that Capcom is just like, yeah, no Onimusha. Like, just don't hire actors to play hire well-known Japanese actors or otherwise to play the characters. You kind of fucked yourself over with that, idiots. Anyway, at the very least, the fact that we never got a remaster of 2 or 3. At least those 2, see how they perform? No? Not even gonna bother? Christ. It almost strikes me as lazy. Sorry I'm getting so heated, but I just think it's a huge error on Capcom. Like, that is fucking money sitting on the table. If they could have that appeal even a little bit to Souls fans, I'm not saying make it exactly like a Souls games, but you can kind of angle the marketing that way. Like, just say it's pretty tough. It's got scary, cool monsters in it, and like you have these cool combat mechanics. And Onimusha, like, is relatively a slow-paced game. Yeah, there's fast things you can do in it, but it has that same sort of appeal. And it's crazy to me that there hasn't been a new Onimusha. Makes no sense. So now we're entering a special section that I like to call Special Little Guys. These are games that they're singular games, aside from some remasters, re-releases, characters appearing in other games, that I think have enough fan support that Capcom can absolutely turn these into franchises. But they just haven't for some reason. First up, of course, is God Hand. God Hand is a special little guy. Obviously, there's only ever one God Hand. Obviously, IGN basically kneecapped this game from getting any decent sales back in the day, because that's when people really, really took reviews super seriously. And with the little marketing this game had, with Capcom really not pushing Clover's games, it was a self-sabotage for sure. I don't know if they're angry at Mikami or what, but God Hand has accrued so much fan love, so many people wanting to return, so many people singing its praises, that you could do almost anything with it. Do a remake, do a nice HD re-release with some bells and whistles, do a full-on sequel, people will fucking show up. Maybe don't spend the same amount of money you spent on Resident Evil. You don't have to. Maybe make it a downloadable thing. Maybe turn it into a side-scrolling beat-em-up. There's a million things you could do with God Hand, and that name, that box art, that wackiness would be an absolute success. Absolute success. So it is a special little guy to me and to everyone out there. But I'm marking off this section for some of the games where I'm like, yeah, these don't really qualify under franchise, but you have to talk about them in some way. Much like that, Captain Commando. Only one game, but his name is the goddamn company. Captain Commando. Like, come on. Him and obviously his whole crew have appeared in other fighting games in the past. There's obviously been several re-releases of Captain Commando games. So this is a singular game that I still think has the potential to become a full-blown franchise if Capcom were to do, like, a downloadable side-scrolling beat-em-up that's in, like, 3D. I don't care what it is. But these characters are so fun. The world is so crazy and unique that, like, it's just sitting there, again, doing nothing. That's one thing I'll give points to Sega for. I don't give Sega many points, but I do when they earn them. And letting a bunch of random studios just try out a bunch of franchises that they don't do anything with, like recently, amazing. Capcom should absolutely be doing something like that. Just don't try to push them as big AAA things and say this is the new version of that. Like, Sega has really been portioning that off and saying, like, this is what we're doing over here, this is this initiative over there, it's much smaller in scope, please enjoy that. Like, Capcom absolutely should be doing this, and Captain Commando is definitely one of those things. Have to talk about Ghost Trick. It might not have been if it wasn't for the recent remaster that was available on everything, and lots of people love it. So many people have reverence and nostalgia for this game because it's an incredible game. It has such charming characters, story, writing, everything about it. But it still is the only singular title. If you count the remaster, maybe that's two, but I'm trying to be fair here in that this is something that Capcom should be doing more of. Again, you could put this out as a digital sequel. Like, how much money are you really spending on that? You're, like, making truckloads of fucking cash over Resident Evil and Monster Hunter and, all these other games. So I don't know why they don't. I don't know why they don't have at least a smaller digital only couple of studios that work for them to put these things out. Like, the fact that, like, Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection came out, that's great. Maybe do something more, like maybe have a new Ghost Trick there. I don't know. I'm just a little skeleton guy. I don't know what I'm doing. Our last special little guy is Red Earth / Warzard. I think this is still one of Capcom's most unique games. Worlds, characters. This getting a pretty big, sizable resurgence in people being interested in it when it was probably one of the premier, along with Darkstalkers, fighting games that were highlighted in the Capcom Fighting Game Collection. You could do so much more with this franchise. You could, again, reboot it. You could do a full-on sequel. It doesn't even have to be a fighting game. It could be like an RPG fighting game hybrid. It's just, World is just so cool, and the way the game plays is so unique. And people like these characters now because you did put them in front of them. You made the game accessible. If you just make some of these games or franchises accessible again, some people will start talking about it more. They can do more with it. So this is our last little special little guy because obviously our next franchise, kind of a big one. What am I supposed to say? Resident Evil is Capcom. I almost positive that Capcom, there's a good 50-50 chance Capcom might not have even survived the 90s if it wasn't for Resident Evil. And a lot of my research doing what happens and whatnot, Capcom were struggling pretty hard in like 96. Like the entire arcade business was steadily going down. People were sick of Street Fighter at that point. And everything that I read about it with interviews with Capcom people saying like the console division then started to take off because Resident Evil was selling millions and millions of copies. Well, the arcade sector was going down. Like they were losing money, especially on Street Fighter 3, the first versions of it, right? I am almost convinced that if Resident Evil hadn't been the success it was, then Capcom might have like even closed their doors or had like drastic went down. You know, maybe they released way less games, but it was such a savior at that time. And again, spawned a whole genre. You know, you could say like, yeah, Alone in the Dark, sure. But I mean, it's Resident Evil. Like there was no one really copying that formula until Resident Evil came out and obviously helped spawn a million other franchises and some of Capcom's own, obviously, with Devil May Cry and some others. So, I mean, what's to say? I think it's Capcom's highest selling series overall. I believe. Over Street Fighter, over Monster Hunter. I still think it's the GOAT in that respect. I mean, all the things it spawned off into. Movies of questionable quality. TV shows of questionable quality. You know, action figures. Amazing series of novels. Mangas. You know, just all the merch. Everything about Resident Evil, from like, you know, I'm using fine and danger statuses from Resident Evil because it's so iconic. Like, you know, whether it's Biohazard or Resident Evil, I don't think Capcom will ever stop making Resident Evil. They may take breaks here and there. We definitely had a break between 6 and 7. And even then there are spin-offs in between, but like I don't think they'll ever fully stop because I don't think it'll ever leave the collective gamers' brains. It'll never fully leave your mind palace. It'll always have some version, some game, whether it be Resident Evil 1, 2, 4, or even like 7 or like recent ones. Like there'll be someone that's like, oh, that was the first time I played Resident Evil game and like it'll stay with me forever. Like again, that shit is priceless. Phoenix Wright, the Ace Attorney, Phoenix Drive, whatever moniker, Ace Attorney, Turnabout, whatever. It's not Capcom. It's not. I want it to be, but it is a strong smoking sexy style. And the fact that these games don't cost a lot, these are probably some of Capcom's most profitable games. I compared to some like other big flops, you know, that like, you know, it took millions and millions and millions of dollars to make and sold like, you know, not even that much. But I think the way that they've been handling Ace Attorney recently has been pretty smart. Is it the same glory days as it had on the DS? No, but I think that's really hard to recapture. You know, again, this has become an iconic series for Capcom. Because of there's a lot of similarity between a lot of these franchises, you know, except for maybe like Breath of Fire or something. It's a lot of fighting games, beat 'em ups, action games. The fact that Phoenix Wright has carved out a niche and sort of brought so much more variety into the mix to appeal to people that just, you know, don't want a really hardcore action game, just want to have a fun adventure, mystery, whatever. And, you know, the gameplay is, you know, essentially what it is. It doesn't require a whole lot of finesse or being precise per se. So I think there's, again, a ton of value there. Ton of value where, you know, to use an overused phrase, it diversifies your portfolio. And so many people have so many memories of these games and its localizations and all of its jokes, step ladders, you know, hamburgers, the whole thing. Yeah, Phoenix Wright is like goated for me. I will say, like, the last like 2 I haven't actually finished because they are long, and I'm just at this point in my life where I don't have all the time in the world to play them, but like it'll always be like a cherished franchise for me. And I think for Capcom, they like recognize it's like, yes, there is an established fan base that will play these games, will support these games, that will talk about these games, and I think it will remain somewhere in Capcom's Rolodex in some form, you know, every couple of years. I don't think they're gonna completely abandon this anytime soon. I don't think they're gonna Mega Man this. I hope not. I think that's where it is, because as a text adventure, it still also doesn't have like as much appeal as, say, Resident Evil in terms of video game fans. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm putting in Smoky Sexy Style. I hope you agree. Like, I don't think it's quite to that level, but I want it to be. I'm really pulling for it to be, but unless there's a sudden turnabout where you can put it to the Capcom level, I don't think that's going to happen unless there's some big 3D console game where you actually move them around in 3D and investigate things. Like, I don't see that happening. I think Capcom knows this is still kind of niche, so we have to keep it in that realm. Like, we're not going to spend too much money because I don't want them to make a big blunder and spend a shitload of money on. Then that's actually what kills the franchise, because we've seen that Capcom will do that when it pleases them. Power Stone. Power Stone is a hard one, because everyone that if you know, Power Stone is fucking awesome. There is a lot of mainstream appeal with Power Stone. Like, there is Smash Brothers style, like, appeal there. If Capcom had played their cards right, Power Stone could have been like a casual, friendly Capcom fighting game where they could, you know, have had a Power Stone 3 and 4, and then bring maybe Ryu in it as a cameo fighter, like a crossover fighter, and then put more, and then it could have become the Capcom casual fighting game for people to just play around with, you know, kind of like Smash. Also have its own like competition, like pro competition level and stuff, while the mainstream fighting games that Capcom were producing were also going. That's just a what if scenario. That's how much potential Power Stone had, and then just nothing. I think it's because it was derived from the arcades, and because they only made them on the Dreamcast. I think that was a massive fucking mistake. Obviously there's the PSP collection, but that was also a massive mistake. That PSP collection should have been on PS2, should have been on Xbox, should have been on GameCube. The fact that it wasn't is ludicrous to me. It's pure insanity. I think this has more appeal and potential appeal to be a bigger franchise than Ghosts and Goblins was, or Bionic Commando, so I'm going to put that on Big Zenny. It's not Smoking Sexy Style, just because there's just not a lot to really talk about, because there's only the 2 games, you know, and a collection. But this is just one of those things where if Capcom just fucking spent a little money reviving. Yes, I know there's some made-up fantasy bullshit release list that says a Power Stone remake is being made and it's coming out this year. No, I don't believe it. And the great thing about saying no, I don't believe it, is that I can be happy to be wrong if it does turn out to be true. So, hey, future viewers that are watching this video in a year's time, let me know if that turned out. Let me know if a Power Stone remake or sequel came out. But yeah, that's Big Zenny for sure. I think all these characters, all of them are extremely charming. You could do so much with this. You could make it a free-to-play thing if you have to. To get it greenlit, if you have to. I'd rather you not, but that's an option Capcom could do. You can make it a super cheap game where it's like $20 and then you pay for like a character or like a season, whatever. Like, I know some people don't like that stuff, but I'm just trying to say it has potential to be that, because it doesn't have the potential to Capcom to spend like, $100 million on it. So try to make it a next Street Fighter. I think that's too risky. But it's still, yeah. Right, I'm looking, and what it's next to, Final Fight, Breath of Fire, that makes sense to me. Power Stone should be like out right now, but it's not. Hopefully it will be one day, if this video isn't dated. Rival Schools is gonna be, is rough. It's rough. You know why it's rough? It's because I don't know why it's taken over me. Like the amount of shares, the amount of rooms, sorry, I should say, that Rival Schools has taken up in my mind palace is like crazy. Every time I go back and play Rival Schools or Project Justice, every time I think about the untranslated dating mini game or dated RPG game that's nestled in the Japanese version of Rival Schools. Anytime I think about all these characters, anytime I think about how these characters live in the same world as Street Fighter, and how Capcom has done so little to capitalize on that. Like, Rival Schools should be as entwined in Street Fighter as Final Fight is. Like, there should be a Rival Schools character in Street Fighter 4. There should have been one in Street Fighter, well, there was in 5. But there should have been more in Street Fighter 5, and there should be some in 6. There should be several in 6. The fact that they're not capitalizing that is crazy. I mean, we're lucky and blessed that Akira appeared in Street Fighter 5. It's probably the best thing that happened in Street Fighter 5, quite frankly. But the fact that they have not remastered these is crazy. I know I've said crazy so many times, but that's what you have to say when you talk about this fucking company. You know, some decisions make total sense. Oh yeah, good call. And some decisions like, what the fuck are you smoking? Why haven't you done this? So all this to say is that I have a heavy bias. Like, I even think I have a slightly more bias than over Final Fight. Just all these characters are cool. They're all awesome. They all have this appeal to them, and it's just like they're just sitting there, just unused, just not showing up, save for like the occasional cameo or a costume in Street Fighter. They have much more to bring, much more potential than that. Looking at it though, I don't think it could compete with these. I certainly don't think it can compete with Capcom. So I'm still going to keep it around here, but I want to put it higher. It just burns me so much that like this and Power Stone, just Capcom, just, oh, these didn't sell that well in the Dreamcast, then oh, fuck them. Fuck them. They didn't sell well in the Dreamcast because you only put them on the Dreamcast, idiots. Why was this not released on the PS2 once the Dreamcast failed? Why? Makes no fucking sense. Like, there's so many decisions. Obviously, hindsight is 2020. But there's so many decisions where it's like, if you just did that, it would have been fine. This would have found an audience on, you know, the platform that had like 12 billion more people playing on it. But no, you just put out these arcade ports of the Dreamcast. Oh, the last one didn't sell well. Fuck it. Fuck you. Sorry, getting very heated. This is a perfect fighting game story mode. Fucking Batsu Kyosuke, get away! I'm being crossified! Steel Battalion. So yes, technically Steel Battalion does count. Has its 2 games, one with its big dumb mech controller, one with its even bigger, dumber controller yourself. And heavy arms. Maybe I might make a what happened about that someday. I think this is crap god, and let me explain why. I don't think you're ever going to convince... What is the appeal of Steel Battalion? Let me know in the comments right now. Alright, are you done? The appeal of Steel Battalion was its big dumb controller. Other than that, it's a pretty standard, completely serviceable mech game. So the whole appeal was the controller. You are not convincing. Outside of like a super extra special, expensive, limited run version where you get the big dumb controller, you'll get a couple people to buy that. You might make a profit on it, but you are not convincing people to fill their living rooms with a shit ton of plastic and crap around themselves. Like, that's a very hard sell nowadays, especially charging a premium. And then the Kinect version obviously failed. It's like one of the worst. When I think of like one of the worst games I've ever played, it's Steel Battalion Heavy Arms. Like, literally unplayable. If you say, no, you can get used, no, absolutely not. Shutting that down. So I think this IP, this franchise is worthless. How are you supposed to bring it back? VR? Yeah, that hot thing? I don't think that's gonna do it. Like, I don't think that's gonna do it when, like, Resident Evil games aren't even selling that well in VR anymore, unfortunately, despite their quality. Like, I think this is a worthless IP. That's just my honest take. You can totally disagree. And you can make the statement, oh, it could work in VR. Yeah, maybe. But is Capcom going to do that? Does that have value? Or people can be like, yeah, Steel Battalion's back. Yeah, for like James Small or like one or the two of the other people that I know that even care about Steel Battalion. Obviously, that's my own perspective. If you think Steel Battalion is you know, has more worth than Dark Void, than Ghosts and Goblins, like where do you think I would honestly put that? You know, I think I need to stick to my guns here, because I think like Steel Battalion Heavy Arms like poisoned that well so much that it's just this isn't worth bringing back. If it wasn't married to a weird controller gimmick, if it was just a really good mech combat game, then fine, you could remaster that, put it out on something. But no, its whole appeal was the controller. So what are you supposed to do at that point? And aside from that, I don't even know if there's any I don't even remember if there's any mechanics that are like that interesting in the actual game, like how you shoot other mechs and how you progress. Like, I don't even know if there's appeal there, if there's something unique there that will make it even stand out. Like, why even bring it back at that point if you don't have the big dumb controller? You know, I love the big dumb controller. Don't get me wrong. Someone had balls with that. Obviously, the Steel Battalion, I don't think Capcom can do anything with this. I just don't. You know, like, and you know, fuck me in my life, how it goes. This is probably gonna get a reboot before Final Fight, fucking Power Stone do. You know, judging by how things usually shake out. So Street Fighter, it's a pretty good one, huh? Street Fighter basically revolutionized the arcade industry. Put Capcom on the map. Yeah, it's a pretty big one, so I think that's Capcom. I don't think anyone's gonna come for me at that. And I love the fact that I picked Street Fighter 1 box art, because I don't know, I just felt like it. Getting rowdy, but yeah, what is there to say? Like probably the most. If you talk about top 10 best video game characters, like Street Fighter's at least 3 or 4 of them. Like Chun-Li, Ryu, Ken, Cammy, Guile. Maybe not Guile, but Cammy's cats. All of this. The Zangief. Armika. Come on. You know? It can't be anything other than Capcom. If I had another tier above it, I'd put it there too. But no. You know, this is why I'm even doing this, because it's like I knew like there's some pretty good franchises I put pretty high up there, like just these themselves, but also, you know, everything else I'm taking into consideration here. But like Street Fighter is Capcom for life. I don't think they'll go as long as they did without doing a Street Fighter game again that they did in the 2000s during the dark ages of fighting games. I don't think that's going to happen. Not to that level. And even then, like, just the way that the industry works now, it's like there will be a Street Fighter character in something every year. Like, whether it be a mobile game, a crossover in another fighting game, shows up as a costume for an action game that Capcom may be putting out. Things like that. Like, there's going to be some Street Fighter representation somewhere, because Capcom now knows that people love these characters. And in the 2000s, it wasn't so clear. It was like, oh, well, now it's all about Resident Evil. But no, now they can definitely coexist with each other. You don't have to prioritize one over the other, even though they clearly prioritize Resident Evil a bit more. But you know what I'm saying? Like, and there's still so many other things you can do. You can do a remake of Street Fighter 1 if you want. You can do bring back the world of Street Fighter 3 in some fashion. You can just do a Street Fighter 3 game, like a spiritual successor to that. You can, you know, go back to an anime art style again after doing the realistic one. There's still so many avenues that Street Fighter can do. It can spin off into an RPG or an action game, maybe. Maybe that's not advisable, but, you know. You can bring back Final Fight, then put a Street Fighter character in as a playable character. Wouldn't that be crazy? Wouldn't that be crazy? Wouldn't it be awesome if Cammy showed up as a boss in a Final Fight game? Wouldn't that be sick? Anyway, So yeah, I don't think I need to explain myself other than that. Street Fighter Capcom for life. Sengoku Basara. This is a funny one. There has not been a Sengoku Basara game in a long ass time, huh? I don't even remember the last time there was one. So I have to consider these games were like, more popular in Japan than they were in America, especially when it got off to a very rough start with Devil Kings. I'm not sure. I don't. I know this certainly has its fans. I think me personally, I'm gonna put it down to fine. I just think this style game, like Muso games, just seem to be on a downtrend. There doesn't seem to be that many anymore to me. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like it just seems like Tecmo Koei just doesn't put them out. Is that accurate? I can't remember the last one, like a One Piece game, maybe? I'm not sure. So I don't know if Capcom would ever bring this back. I think they can. I wouldn't be against it. But right now, it just seems like it's in this weird holding pattern, this franchise. Unless there's some weird mobile games you guys know about that I don't fucking know about. But yeah, there was a glut of these in the 2000s. And then I just find as time went on, that Capcom's like, that seems like that kind of petered out. But I think you can bring it back. I think you can do a collection of them for certain. Why not? Just to see how it goes. Like even bring back the fighting game that Arxis made for you. That's actually pretty good. Translate that. That's easy. They could do that like fucking tomorrow. Maybe Arxis would be like, nah, we're not gonna. No, Capcom owns it. Fuck it. Capcom owns the whole franchise. Arxis couldn't tell them what to do with it. Anyway, I think it's fine. I know there's some stinkers in there too. This franchise has. I think there was like that sword fighting game on the Wii. There's some weird things going on there, but yeah, it just seems like this franchise has run out of steam. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe there's some weird Japanese ones that I don't know about that are blowing things up, but I feel like Capcom would turn this into a Apache slot if they haven't already. They have. They must have, right? This must be a Apache slot so far, but yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I think the potential of this franchise is like a little bit lower than bringing back Breath of Fire and people going, oh my god, Breath of Fire is back, or Dino Crisis, or Final Fight, or Okami, or Rival Schools. I think there'd be much more rejoicing versus this, since this is a more recenter franchise than the ones I outlined up here, and there was like a shitload of games in a small amount of time. But yeah, I think that's pretty fair, but you can disagree if you like. Strider, we're getting there. Strider. I know some inside dish that Strider could have been even bigger of a thing if things had gone a certain way. When they re-released that new Strider from 2014, that could have spawned into more stuff, and then Strider could have come back for like another game, blah, 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 blah. There's lots of stuff going on in that vein. Capcom kind of... No, I think Capcom... It wasn't mostly their fault. It was probably like a little bit their fault, but I think it was like, extenuating circumstances. Strider, I think this might be another big Zenny. I think this... Yeah, I have to put Strider above Captain Commando. I think it just has more potential from then because it hasn't been sullied with a bunch of bad games yet. I mean, there were some bad ones in the 16-bit era, weird ports and stuff. But Strider, I think, is a character that still looks so cool. Like, you could do like a 3D action game with him. You can stick to the 2D stuff. They did the Metroidvania thing in Strider 2014. But you could still do lots with Strider, I think. You could do a Strider collection. The fact that hasn't happened is still also baffling to me. So I think this is a big Zenny. I think people still love this character, still think he looks sick as fuck. I think it would be nice to have a Strider game with like, really cool, intimidating, charismatic villain with a plan, not just the Grandmaster and he just kind of being a generic kind of nothing. I think you can expand upon this universe and make it even more interesting and stuff. So a collection at the very least, and I think it has the potential to be even a bigger of a franchise than Capcom allows it to be. Maybe it's because they do have to pay a little bit for Strider to even get mentioned because of the manga group, I believe, that partially owns Strider. It's still a Capcom character. That deal's just so bizarre. I can't think of many deals in video game industry that's quite like Strider, but yeah. These franchises are the ones that are like, this is the tier where I'm like, this is the tier I really want to come back. Obviously, Onimusha is up there. I was pretty passionate when I talked about that, right? And Darkstalkers. But like, these are the ones like per capita, like there's so many of them. Like maybe Lost Planet, kind of like, yeah, sure, cool, Lost Planet, that's fine. But everything else around here is just like, any of these would, I'd be hooting and a hollering for sure if any of these got announced to come back. But yeah, happy enough with that with Strider. Very glad I can include Slam Masters in here because it has 2 games in the series. Slam Masters has the ability to be a very casual, friendly, digital only, or the physical box game as well. But a B tier, a mid-range budget game. Where you just have a bunch of cool characters. You throw Hagar in there, you throw Zangief, you put that out for PC, all consoles, make it a mid-range game, $40 at most, have a good roster of characters and just have really casual but satisfying mechanics. And it just becomes the Capcom wrestling game. You have they put Armika in there, like, come on. That's a fucking another big Zanny. Fuck it. That's like fucking sexy style. I remember back in the day, I want to say like 2010, something like that. 14 years ago. I remember hearing rumors that Yoshinori Ono was bringing back Slam Masters, was doing a wrestling game, or wanted to bring back in some guys. I've never heard that officially, even from people I know that used to work in Capcom. Never heard that from them. But Slam Masters is something that I think, again, is brimming with potential to become something even bigger. It's been so long since one came out, and wrestling is hotter now than it's ever been. If there's any time to bring this back, it would be fucking now. It's been so long since it's come back. Like, I think you could do like a shitload of stuff with this. I think this could be like, something that you consistently given more updates. Season passes. I don't know. Maybe not season passes, but you know what I mean. Like, I think this is the type of thing that people would really, really love. People would really get hyped for. And again, putting Street Fighter characters in there would just maybe even make a deal with like AEW or WWE. Bring in like fucking Kenny Omega in there, or bring in Cody Rhodes or something. Maybe not bring them both in the same game at the same time. I think WWE maybe might not like that. Anyway, I think Slam Masters is just one of those things where, like, if you just pulled the trigger, if you just spend a little bit of money, you might come up with something that becomes really profitable and people really like, in conjunction with all your big AAA RE Engine games. Just one of those things to supplement them, but for whatever reason, they don't take the risk, I guess, even though they're swimming in money. Oh, no, not Calgary. Star Gladiator. I think in terms of bringing back fighting games, this is a little bit lower on the list for me. It's fine. I think Power Stone, Rival Schools are much more valuable franchises. I think the characters are a bit more appealing in a mainstream sense. And, like Star Gladiator and Plasma Sword also has that weird identity crisis where, why'd you call it 2 different things? I think they call it Plasma Sword maybe because they were worried that, like, Lucas might want to sue them over the Star Gladiator name, and I don't know the logistics behind that. But yeah, I think this is a little bit lower on the list. Yeah, next to Armored Warriors and Cyberbots. I think that makes sense. Like, it's a cool game, and it's neat when I play Plasma Sword again on the channel. But yeah, I don't think it's quite up there with these, where people would lose their minds if a new Star Gladiator came out. Not to the lengths that Rival Schools or Power Stone or Final Fight would have. So yeah, I think that's fine. Next up, we obviously have the most beautiful man in the world, Beautiful Joe. it's stacking up there. This is another big Zenny for sure. It's another big Zenny. Like so many people, like Thero would like his mind would explode into slow motion, and blossoms, Sakura blossoms would explode out of it as missiles go sailing by him, and lots of other people. Like if Beautiful Joe was ever to come back, like people would be, if people aren't saying Capcom is Capcom now, they like Joe has so much value as a character. People love this guy so much, and if they were to bring him back in like a game, how there hasn't been a remaster of Beautiful Joe 1 and 2 together is another war crime. Like, I don't understand. There is no reason why they could not. Unless it's the thing that I've heard about Capcom is that, you know, seniors at Capcom that have been there for a long time, for decades even, just don't want to give, outside of Okami, they just don't want people to remember Clover or, you know, Seeds or whatever. They just don't like acknowledging games made by them too much. They're just like, nah, fuck it. It's the same thing as like when Inafune left Mega Man, people just didn't want to touch Mega Man at Capcom. They're just like, I feel uncomfortable making this because the guy who was like the shepherd of that franchise for years, not the creator, obviously, but the shepherd of that franchise who heroed that franchise left, and it's like, it feels like the vibes are off. I think it's the same thing for Beautiful Joe. Like Capcom's just like, I don't know about Beautiful Joe. I just let's can we focus on something else? Ghosts and Goblins? There's no bad vibes associated with that. I just think the way that all the creators at Clover were treated by Capcom and how they felt they were being treated just left a bad taste in their mouths. And Capcom was only ever willing to bring back Okami. No Beautiful Joes, no God Hands, you know, nothing. You only get Okami. So, yeah, Beautiful Joe absolutely should be brought back. All of these things deserve to come back in some form or another. And I think they have the potential to be big hits again. But our last game, now I know I said before that it has to be something that Capcom is homegrown. And I will put forward to you that with all the support and desire that people want a versus game back, it doesn't have to be Marvel. In fact, I don't think it will be Marvel. I think it'll be a long time before we see Marvel and Capcom team up again on a brand new game. I think that's kind of sailed for a long time. Maybe re-releases of them, but the Versus moniker is its own brand to Capcom. It is their own brand. You could put whatever Versus Capcom, and that's its own fighting game. That has its own value. That has its own hype. That has its own fans. Whether it's SNK, whether it's Tatsunoko, whether it's Kellogg's, whether it's anything, that is its own fighting game branch. The Team Hyper Fighter by Capcom is its own thing. So I'm just using the Marvel vs. Capcom logo because it's, you know, iconic. So that's why I'm using that. So I hope that explains where my thought process is here. And of course, it could be Capcom versus Capcom. If Capcom released a game called Capcom versus Capcom, that would be the fucking shit. That would be so funny. It tells you exactly what it is. But if you need to call it Capcom Fighting All-Stars again, if you need to call it, you know, whatever, it doesn't matter. Team game, Capcom fighters, Capcom characters, that's its own fighting franchise to me. And the amount of people that say, when's Marvel? The amount of people that want just a versus fighter back, and Capcom's been out of the game for that for a long time. So, with all that said, the Versus series of games are absolutely smoking sexy style. Just because it's more about the concept rather than the iconic characters that are all established in Street Fighter. I think this is Capcom's absolute second best, probably even more than Darkstalkers, their second best fighting franchise that they can sort of do stuff with in the future. And it could be anything, like all those things I already outlined. Like, I don't know, Midway versus Capcom, Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter. Can we get Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter? That's such a bad idea. I still think we could get an SNK versus Capcom. I would love that personally. Do I think Capcom should do it? I think they should do a Capcom Fighting All-Stars. and just make it a team hyper fighter. That's it. That would be my plan, and I think that would sell really, really well. We can get all these characters back in some form or another. You can get Breath of Fire characters. You can get Darkstalkers characters. You can get a new Onimusha. You can get Beautiful Joe. You can get Power Stone ones. You can get Slam Masters ones. Star Gladiator. Sengoku Basara. You get Jean from God. It would be a massive success. You'd be feeding into all those fans of Capcom games, all these here, and put them all in there. Or at least a lot of them. Resident Evil characters by themselves. Monster Hunter, Devil May Cry, Dragon's Dogma even. It has so much potential to be bigger than it is, and the fact that Capcom is not doing anything with Aiding right now, and Aiding's making that fucking Hunter game, Hunter x Hunter, whatever the fuck it's called, the fact that they are not talking to them and giving them a budget to make like Capcom versus Capcom is again baffling to me. You know, like, have that being developed now, and then maybe when Street Fighter 6 is on, like, its, third season or fourth season, whatever, find the time where that's slowing down a little bit, re-release that. And it's so different than Street Fighter, like, oh, man. I should be running this company. Me, in this chair, this armchair that I'm currently sitting in. All these ideas are great. All of my ideas have been perfect. I don't think they can be disputed. But if you feel like they could be disputed, do let me know in the comments below. I'm sure some of you will. And let me know if you enjoyed this particular tier list video. And if you'd like me to do something similar to this, where I take a look at the Capcom one-off games, like where would I put the Shadows of Rome? Or where would I put the Spyborgs? Where would I put the, what's the other fucking thing? You know the game? You know that game that Capcom put out? Where would I put the Street Fighter Cross Tekkens? That type of stuff. I think that could be a really interesting video too. So let me know what you thought of me and the guys' Capcom franchise tier list. I know I don't fear for this company's fortunes anytime soon, but I think they could be making some smarter choices. I think if you send this video to Capcom, they might actually listen. I somehow doubt that. Please bring back Final Fight.